Did you know that the average eviction can cost anywhere from $3,500 to $10,000 depending upon where you invest in the country? And did you know that nearly half of all renters decided to move out into a new place instead of renewing their lease? I don't want that to happen to you. That's no bueno. So today, we're going to be exploring the top 5 reasons why property owners like this are failing with their long-term rentals, and how you can beat the odds to keep your tenants happy and your properties profitable. Casey Franchini here. Welcome back to my channel at Brick by Brick Wealth. I am your long-term rental property expert and coach, and today we're going to dive into the top 5 reasons why long-term rental properties fail and what you can do about them. I want to help you avoid these common mistakes. But before we get into it, let me take a sip of my iced tea, which is a little watery. All right, let's jump in. The first reason why long-term rentals fail is because of poor property management. I had an investor friend who didn't check on her properties regularly. She thought that since she didn't hear from them that everything was fine. She was dead wrong. Her tenant ended up causing big damage, and it went unnoticed for months because she never went to check. Domestic violence, holes in the walls, ruined carpet, chewed blinds, pet smell everywhere. It cost her $12,000 to fix everything. And a buddy of mine had his property rented with a property management company, and the PM company took forever to respond to the tenants about maintenance requests. And that really drove his tenants away over and over again. He had high tenant turnover. And if you know one thing about property management companies and how they make their money, they make a big bulk of their money on initial tenant placements. It's not uncommon for a PM company to charge the first month's rent just to place a tenant. Now imagine if your tenant ditches out, moves out in the middle of the night, halfway through the lease, because your property management company is being non-responsive and not fixing things on time. Not only do you have another vacancy halfway through the lease agreement, now you have to pay the PM company another possibly 1 month's worth of rent to get that property released to a new tenant. One thing that I'm always telling my students is that just because you hire a property management company doesn't mean you are completely hands-off. You have to make sure that that property management company is doing their job. You're not completely off the hook. No one cares about your property as much as you do. So either you check on the property or you make sure your property management company is checking on the property regularly. The next up biggest fail is skipping on proper tenant screening. And if you watched my other videos, you would know that this is where I have made my biggest mistakes. Early on in my investing career, I really rushed into placing a tenant because it had been a week without tons of applications, and I thought, oh my gosh, no one's going to want to rent my property. So the first person who came in that was kind of okay, I let them rent my property. It was a big mistake. My biggest mistake, actually. They missed rent all the time, they broke frequent clauses in the lease agreement, and turns out they had really bad credit. By not properly screening my tenants before I put them in, this mistake cost me $16,000 in repairs. It takes a while to recoup that cost when your rental income is only $1,000 and you still have to pay your mortgage out of it. Now, a good story is an investor that I know who actually avoided a really bad situation, and she found out that a potential tenant that was applying for her property was giving her false documents. And this is definitely not uncommon. I see this all the time, especially in Memphis where I invest. Potential tenants will come to you with fake W-2s, fake pay stubs, and fake employer letters. My friend found out because this potential tenant was actually a scammer and did this in local for rent Facebook groups. She would get the fake documents, get approved, and squat in the property for months, only ever paying first month's rent to get in. Now, if you brought a pencil to this session, I want you to take it out and write this down or tattoo it to your forehead, as my dad would say. No tenant is better than a bad tenant. If you want a quick but short, powerful training on how to attract A-plus tenants that pay rent on time and don't destroy your property, I have created a video just for you. There's a link in the description below so you can go check it out. Now, this is a big one on how newbie investors fail miserably with investment properties. And it is not understanding the cost of ownership. Many of my students who I help buy their very first rental property have never even owned a home. They've never even gone through the home buying purchase. Many people I talk to don't even own a hammer. So you can imagine how difficult it must be to understand the scope of work that's required in remodeling or rehabbing a property when you've never done it before. And that's why this one is a biggie, because most people don't actually know what it costs to fix things up. They don't know the cost of a roof. They don't understand the importance of water in the basement. They don't think sloping floors is a big deal or will cost much to fix. And they underestimate how much it costs to do drywall and paint. Those are just a few samples. And if you're thinking, well, Casey, there may be surprises when it comes to fixing up a property, you're wrong. There are never any surprises when it comes to a property. You should always know a roof expense, an air conditioner replacement, siding repair, heck, any repair on a house should never be a surprise. And you should always know the cost to fix up a property before you buy it. A lot of newbies especially get sucked into overpaying for properties because they are unaware of how much it actually costs to fix. And they find that out once they've bought it and they're in the process and it's too late. They didn't know they lost money on day one and it was a bad deal to begin with. Have you had some repairs that you weren't expecting? Let's put them in the comments below so we can all learn from each other's mistakes. One common surprise that I will say people do seem to have, although it doesn't need to be a surprise if you do the proper initial research, but it is a main line drain failure. I'm always recommending to my students to get the sewer scoped before they buy the property. Some people don't do that, and you might find that you have a $3,000 to $8,000 main drain line replacement repair in your near future. The fourth biggest mistake is ignoring the rules and the local regulations. And it doesn't have to be ignoring, it could just be that you didn't do your due diligence and you just didn't know. I can't tell you how many people that I've heard about that bought a short-term rental property and didn't know that short-term rentals, Airbnbs, were not allowed in their HOA. So now what can they do? They're either renting it under the radar and hoping they don't get caught, which they do, or they have to turn it into a long-term rental when most times it doesn't cash flow as a long-term rental, or they have to sell it. But if they sold it and they just buy it, they're absolutely taking a loss. Another one of these examples would be building regulations. And this is kind of a fun new one that I don't hear people talking about, but I hear it a lot from my students who come from California. See, in California on the West Coast, where housing is so expensive, it's very common to put an ADU on the property. An ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. That means kind of like a back house, a mother-in-law house, a granny flat, whatever you want to call it. It's a separate tiny little house on the lot of the subject property. Many California residents use these ADUs as supplemental income to help with their massively high mortgage payments. So some new investors who live on the West Coast think that they can go put ADUs on other properties around the country and get extra income that way. I was reading a Facebook thread on a real estate investment group recently, and someone was doing just that. They were a California resident, and their intention was to buy a property with a big lot so they could build some ADUs on the lot and rent them out and get higher cash flow and more income. But unfortunately, ADUs were absolutely not allowed and not even really talked about in that area, and they got denied. So now they're left with one property on a big lot that doesn't cash flow because they were expecting to put 2 or 3 properties on that lot as well. Another example in the rules and regulations section is not understanding rent control laws. You guys, in some parts of the country, there is something called rent control, which means you can only raise your tenant's rent so much. And if you decide to not raise your tenant's rent for several years and do a big increase in the future, sometimes that's just not allowed. So understanding your local rules and regulations is really going to help you save that cash flow and not be a failure when it comes to your rental properties. And last but not least, choosing the wrong location. Buying in appreciating neighborhoods is so important. I cannot harp on this enough. Some investors buy in bad neighborhoods because the high cash flow looks great, but the location is terrible. And the neighborhood's going downhill, which means no appreciation. No appreciation means no net worth growth. So in those neighborhoods, in those bad location areas where cash flow might appear to be good today in year 1 on paper, after a few years, your property is no longer cash flowing. You're not able to increase your rents, yet you also still have raising home insurance, raising property taxes, and everyone charges more with inflation. Your lawn guy will charge more, your air conditioner guy will charge more too. So location matters a lot. If you want to learn how to slay your first rental property and you do not want to make these types of mistakes because you want to be a huge success with rental properties, then you definitely need to download my free guide, Rental Properties Made Easy. You can find a link to that in the description below. It's easy, quick, it's a fun read, and I think you'll enjoy it. Well, those are the 5 reasons why rental properties fail. And if you can keep clear of these mistakes, you are by far ahead of the majority. If you found this video helpful, please do all the things, smash that like button, hit subscribe, ring the bell. That way you can be notified of all the videos that I put out to help you invest safely and securely with long-term rentals. And until next time, keep building your wealth brick by brick.